Good evening. My name is Councilor Brian Arrigo. This is a meeting of the Legislative Affairs Subcommittee. Today is December 10th, 2012. We have one item on the agenda today, which is an ordinance amending the City of Revere's sewer use regulations. In attendance today from the committee, we have Councilor Giannino, Councilor Powers, Councilor Reardon, and Councilor Zambuto. I'd also like to recognize my colleagues who are not on the committee: Councilor Correggio, Councilor Guanasso, Councilor Penta, Councilor Patch, and that's it. I know we have Bob Button from CDM in the audience. We have Donnie Goodwin from Public Works, and if you guys would like to. Oh, sorry, John Doherty from CDM. So if you guys would like to come up and give your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're here before you tonight to make some changes to our sewer use ordinance. This was brought about by the consent order that was sent down to us by the federal government. We'd like to get this approved as soon as possible due to the fact that we have some reporting issues with DEP and the EPA coming up very shortly with some of our planning. The whole intent of the idea was not to come down on people per se, be the big brother. It was just that we need a mechanism that will allow us to go in for people who are willing to cooperate, and we're willing to help them with the inflow system. We did a lot of work for the people, for the public. This is not something to punish people. It's just something that we need to have the proper tools and mechanisms to properly carry out this consent order and get some of the problems that we need rectified to get rectified. This is not something that's being put in there to punish anybody or for my department or anybody else associated with this program to go on a witch hunt. It's just something that we had the lawyers look at. We've looked at other ordinances. It's a necessary tool to give us the ability to implement what we really need to implement. And as long as people are cooperating, it will not pose a problem to the public at all. But I'll turn this over to Bob Buttons, let him give you, update on most of the regulatory issues. And like I said, this is not something that we had to try to punish the public. It's something that it's actually required of us by the federal government to do. And at the same time, if we implement the program properly, hopefully at some point in time you'll see the water bills and sewer bills start to decrease because you won't be paying for all this illicit discharging that's going on throughout the community.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bob Button. I'm an associate with CDM Smith, and I've been working with the city for about a half dozen years now on various parts of the administrative order and the consent decree. As Donnie said, the regulations, the proposed changes that we've developed working with the city are intended to help the city with compliance with the consent order and provide a mechanism where homeowners or businesses, private property owners, who are improperly connected to the sewer systems, there's a mechanism for the city to work with them to change those inappropriate connections and actually to help the city with compliance with the consent decree. As Donnie said, we've worked with Paul Capizzi, Frank Stringy, Nick Rystrom, Donnie, and the mayor's office to develop these ordinances. We've looked at several surrounding communities, and we're working with the city's attorneys under the consent decree to come up with reasonable requirements and reasonable changes to the city's order. Very briefly, the package that everyone received had a cross-section of a typical home and typical pipes within the street, stormwater pipes, sanitary sewer pipes, and then connections to individual homes. As all of you are aware, we've been working throughout the city for the last 3+ years doing tremendous amount of investigations, focusing on issues in the street, in the city's pipes, and in the city's system. And at the same time, we've been looking at the impact of service lines coming from homes, of sump pumps in homes, of roof leaders and other types of connections that are improperly, in many cases, connected to the city's sewer systems. What the regulation will allow us to do is work with these private homeowners, private business owners, to help make the proper connections where rainwater would be connected to the stormwater systems and sanitary sewers would be connected to the sanitary sewers. And what happens is, many of you are aware, when there's a rain event in the city, we'll end up with sanitary sewer overflows where sewage actually pops up out of the ground in many cases. By working with homeowners to remove this flow that shouldn't be in the system, we're actually helping the city to comply with the consent order and reduce the size of extra capacity that the city would have to build in the sewers to keep these sump pumps from overwhelming the system every time it rains. So it's a careful balance between lining the pipes, doing the work that the city has been doing for the last several years to fix the systems in the roadway, in addition to working with homeowners to fix roofs that shouldn't be connected, to disconnect sump pumps, those types of things. And that's why the ordinance has been set up the way it's been set up. I'd be happy to answer any very specific questions if there are any, or general questions at your pleasure. Great. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Before I open it up to members of the committee, I do have a couple of questions, and hopefully we can just go through them pretty quickly.
Sure.
I recognize that this is mostly a housekeeping change in ordinances, and if anything, it kind of ends up strengthening some of the regulations that we have. There were a couple of things that I pointed out, and I just want to go through them. And I'll go through them just as they are in the ordinance. In section C, the last provision says that we're replacing the word shall with, replacing may with shall, I believe.
No.
Oh, no, sorry, replacing shall with may. And I think that is in reference to the hiring or the use of licensed drain layers. Is that correct?
Just bear with me 1 second. I'll have to look at the actual ordinances itself.
No problem.
So that's section 1308. Just bear with me 1 second.
Section C of the ordinance, the last sentence of section C.
Section 13.08. Just bear with me 1 second.
No problem.
460. Yeah, the work shall be done by a licensed, yeah, it's replacing, it is associated with a licensed drain layer, that's correct.
So it's changing it from shall to may?
Correct.
Okay. And was there any reason for that change?
Well, in some instances, like in the lining work is the one that comes immediately to mind, there are just a handful of companies nationally that do this type of work. Many of them have been working in the city for several years. National Water Main, for example, in situ form, I'm sure you've seen their trucks working around the city. They may or may not be.
Are they not licensed, or?
The reasoning for putting in the licensed drain layer to begin with was really to protect the homeowner from contractors coming out doing their household work. But the way it was written, it's all encompassing. And what it's done is we've had major projects that needed to be done, like with BJ's and these other big companies, they come in, we need to get a licensed drain layer on to do that. Most of the people that are on the licensed drain layer list are not capable of doing these large infrastructure jobs and things of this nature. So like Bob said, especially coming to the inflow work and things of that nature, the licensed drain layer was put in there to protect the homeowner, but at the same time, it's actually slowing down the process and slowing down businesses. So it comes down to myself and Nick Rystrom, and if members of the Public Works Committee wanted to get into it. In order to get a drain layer license to do this, you could be setting back the projects 6 weeks to 2 months, depending on what happens between, the process between City Hall and here. So it's just, like you said initially, it's just a house cleaning issue, and it also leaves the drain layers license in there for the protection of the public.
Okay, it just caught my eye because to make a change, after working in the legislature for a couple of years, the changes between shall and may can be pretty important. So
Bob and I would discuss if it's something to have to do with the SRF or the consent order, or if we have a major developer that comes in and major infrastructure that needs to be done, a lot of that cannot be done by the smaller companies with and you don't want to delay, buildings and businesses going up, 6 weeks to 2 months to 3 months or whatever. So it's just something just like we said, it's a house cleaning issue.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't allowing people who, I guess when you think of unlicensed, you might think that they're not capable of doing the work, but it sounds like...
In any event, regardless, they'd have to be bonded and insured and everything else. So the bigger they are, the more...
Inspected by you.
Yeah, they're inspected and actually they're pre-qualified in order to bid on the city's work. They have that minimum capability or qualification.
And it kind of does, it is counter to the open bidding law because you have outside people that are bidding on this work and they're not licensed streamers.
Yep. Okay. One really technical piece in section F, it's the 5th line down, permissible by law, comma, shall. I think it should be and the city shall. I took a look, and this is the first time that I looked at it was today. So, I looked at it and I wasn't sure. If you read the sentence, it doesn't make sense. It looks like it should be in the city shall indemnify the owner, but.
Okay, I'm an engineer, not an attorney, so I don't want to offer legal advice. As I read it,
Yep.
the MWRA and/or the city, to the extent permissible by law, so either party and/or,
Gotcha.
I think covers your concern there. But
gotcha.
again, I'm not an attorney.
Yep.
And I just will add that the city solicitor and outside counsel have reviewed this, and they are attorneys.
Yep.
No one's perfect.
And my final concern was about in section I, which lays out the fines and penalties. It looks like the fines are coming down from $1,000 to $1,000 a day to $50 a day. And I just didn't know if there was any reasoning behind that, or if the $1,000 was viewed as excessive, or.
Well, there's the civil penalty, if you will, which I think has been increased, and then the actual city's fees, the fine, if you will, has been decreased. So part of what we're doing is trying to work with homeowners to help them, to encourage them to participate, and not, as Donnie said, trying to punish people automatically, if you will.
Yeah, I believe the civil has actually gone down also. So the civil penalty initially was no less than 10,000 a day, and now it is to not exceed 5,000 a day. So again, that's something that we may want to consider. But it kind of stuck out to me that
Well, I'll double check
that
those
would be
numbers
changed.
as well.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, perfect. Thank you, John. Bear with me a second.
And I'll open it up to other councilors. I know Councilor Zambuto.
I'm sorry, Counselor, if I could. It looks like there may have also been some changes in the state law. John just pointed out to me that that's the maximum that's allowed by a Mass General Law citation that we have in our notes here. So again, it could be administrative as well.
Administrative. No, that's great. And like I said, all I did was looked at our old ordinances, compared them to what was being proposed, and.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
There we go.
Councilor Zambuto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bob, I'm looking at this diagram here, and,
Oh, sure. Yep.
I'm someone who reads plans pretty well. I've been doing it for 40 years.
Sure.
This is confusing.
Okay.
You've got a cross connection here. We'll start with right at the front of at the right side of the page here. It says cross connection to storm sewer. If it's going in the storm sewer, how's it a cross connection?
It shows sometimes where storm sewers are cross-connected, you end up with water quality issues, so it's not physically bad to go into the storm
Okay.
sewer, but depending on what's getting into that
I
storm
get,
sewer.
okay, all right, so there's a reason for it. Because I'm looking at this broken lateral, and the way the drawing looks, it looks like the rain leader's going into that, but then it's going into what you're calling a sanitary sewer.
Yes.
Now, that would be a cross connection.
There are different types of cross connections. There are volume connections and water quality connections.
Okay.
So sewage and stormwater can create water quality issues. Stormwater in your sewer system creates capacity issues.
Okay,
So
okay.
it goes back and forth both ways.
All right, so, because none of this looks like it's, what I understand to be cross-connecting would be a storm drain going into a sanitary sewer. That would be what I understand as a cross-connection, but I'm sure I'm not an expert on volume and all this other quality of water going in. A cross-connection to me is a cross-connection, and it shouldn't be. So I was just confused.
Depending on which direction.
Yeah, I was just confused by the drawing a little bit, but now it makes sense if that's what it in fact means.
And we're trying to show a dozen different problems all in one picture. They
Right.
may not all obviously exist in the same locations.
Right.
Or,
Right.
one problem in one system could lead to a problem in another. For example, the leaky house lateral coming out, if sewage is leaking out of that and getting into this sanitary system, then there's another cross connection.
Right.
And that's why we're.
Okay, gotcha, okay. All right, that's really all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Zambudo. Councilor Ridden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of observations. First of all, the issue on section F. I agree with the chair that the word "and" has been missing in that fifth sentence. I'm sure it's a typographical error. But beyond that, this is, I would think anybody would agree, a major change to our to this particular ordinance, Title 13, Chapter 1308, A through. What I would like to see before we take this to a vote is, rather than isolated words here and there, the entire proposed ordinance. I have no doubt in my mind that we need to change the ordinance to be in compliance with our consent agreement. There's no question about that. However, it's almost impossible to take words out unless you're looking at the entire ordinance, which I could probably find on here. But even that's difficult. I'd like to see a copy of the entire ordinance as proposed, with that word "and" in there, by the way.
Sure.
You might want to add that.
Yep.
The other question I have is, and again, we're all concerned, I think most of us are concerned about how this is going to affect people who have dealt with this issue for a long time, doing what we would now call the wrong thing, and the kind of thing that has essentially put us in the situation we're in, which is putting non-sanitary type of inflow into our sanitary system, which we're paying through the teeth to deal with, and vice versa.
Yes.
And vice versa, it going out as well. But it's going to mean that people are going to have to consider renovations in their homes when they're confronted with this issue. What I would like to know first and foremost, when you say you want to help the people, give me an example of what you would help someone who's already got. For instance, I'm thinking the sump pump issue is probably the major issue.
Yep.
I'm not seeing a lot of big problems with the drain water running off in there. Most, although I'm sure it happens, I think most people could divert that probably fairly successfully without too much of a
It's called cutting and splashing, so when it comes down the outside of your house, you would cut it at the outside
Sure.
before it goes
And
into the
send it off
foundation.
into the backyard or something.
Exactly.
Right, that's easy, relatively speaking. But the sump pump issue, I think, can be far more challenging and vexing for most people. So what do you mean when you say we want to help
Sure.
the residents overcome these issues?
We, in August of this year, did another SRF application for funding from the state to be used for a sump pump eradication program. So when the SRF list, the funding list, is announced usually in about the January timeframe, there is monies that have been applied for where we could help with a type of amnesty program, if you will, to help homeowners pay to remove some of these sumps. And depending on the home, it's a variety of costs in terms of how it would be done. But one of the things that's important is again, as I said before, if we don't get these sump pumps out, then the city has to invest money in making the city's pipes larger, and it's actually more economical given how many instances in the city there are that people have sump pumps for us to try to work with homeowners to take the flow out. It'll actually save money in the long run, we believe. And then the other part of that that's challenging, in some cases with cuts and splashes, if you have a small lot, and actually one of the folks that works in my office on Martin Street has this situation, one of Councilor Gonasso's neighbors, and they have a lot of houses, and when everybody splashes, then sometimes your neighbor's flow runs into your yard, and it's not just your house, but it's others around you as well. And there are areas in the city where we're looking at expanding the drainage system. So giving homeowners an option where there's a piece of city infrastructure that they can properly connect to is another way that we're trying to help homeowners. The consent decree is about a 10-year period to come into compliance, so everything won't be fixed the first year, as we've said before, but we are trying to come up with those types of ways to help homeowners.
That brings me to my next question. In the case of a now lateral that connects to the sanitary system, would it be permissible to reconnect that to the storm sewer system in at least some cases, or is that not possible?
It really depends on internal plumbing in the homes, and again, things were done differently in decades past. In a lot of cases, especially in older homes, you'll find that the plumbing is all commingled inside the house or maybe under the slab inside the house, so it becomes very, very challenging to deal with that, especially if somebody's finished their basement or done other things, as many people have. So one of the things that we're looking at is trying to do it on the outside of the homes if we can. Down in the Goldie Street area, there were several homes, not a lot, but there were a few where we did cuts and splashes as part of the work that we recently completed over there to try to make sure that when we put in the new sewer system, people weren't continuing to be connected in properly.
But just as far as within the structure of this ordinance, if either the wherewithal were there to be provided through the grant program, or what you're referring to as the, I'm sorry.
State Revolving Fund,
Yes.
SRF, yes.
SRF. Would it be permissible, assuming either the homeowner wanted to assume the cost or he was eligible for a grant, to tie into the storm sewer system as opposed to the sanitary
Yes.
system?
Absolutely. Yeah, we encourage that.
I assumed that you
exactly.
did, but I wanted to make sure people who were listening understood there was an alternative. If they were willing or able to afford it, or able to get a grant, that, this doesn't have to be a disaster as far as their seller is concerned. And the other thing I would mention is, while you say remove the sump pumps, as a practical matter, that's not, removing the sump pump is not likely
Correct.
to be something
Correct.
that is viable, but relocating the effluents is.
You're absolutely correct. I misspoke. Yeah, redirecting is the proper term.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council Ridden. Council Correggio.
Thank you, Chairman Arrigo. I want to thank you for coming before us. I'm in full support of this ordinance. It's something that's really badly needed for the city of Revere. The only question I have is on Section D. It says the word regulation with the word regulations, and on the beginning of that paragraph, the first supplement, it talks about threatens to interfere with the operations of the city sewer system. Can you explain that?
Bear with me, Councilor, because I'm trying to go back and forth between these as well. Frank sent me the package that was sent to the councilors. So your question is in Section D?
Right.
The regulation versus regulations?
Right.
Okay, bear with me a second and see if I can pull that up here. 465.
In the beginning of that is a paragraph explaining that. If you can go to that.
I can tell you what's happening here. I just had to read it. In the previous versions, it said may be discharged, including any federal regulation.
Right.
But what we've done is we've changed it to read federal and state regulations. So we're making it plural because it's referencing both federal law and state law. So that's the answer for that question, that part of your question?
Yes, that's correct.
And could you repeat, I'm sorry, Councilor?
On Section D, there's the beginning of that supplement as a paragraph. It says, threatens to interfere the operation of the city's sewer system. Violate issue of emergency order, immediately suspend the discharge and cease violation. So that's at the beginning of, it's another paragraph of section D.
Yep.
So I wanted you to explain that paragraph.
Sure. It talks about in the existing language that any and all owners of buildings where roof water, groundwater, or surface water is being disposed of contrary to the provisions of this section shall be notified by the Department of Public Works. We added in and/or other appropriate city departments, so expanding because we're working with the city engineer, we're working with the city planner, so it's expanded beyond just Public Works. All of those folks are involved. Building department, health inspectors, plumbing inspectors. It was a more broad definition to encompass really everyone in the city that's working on those issues.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank
Sure
you.
thing.
Thank you, Councilor Correggio. Councilor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions. They've been televising and relining in many areas throughout the city, particularly in the areas that I represent, Oak Island and Point of Pines.
Yes.
What I'd like to know is if they have found any violations, violations meaning someone that is either the storm drain is hooked up to the sewer or the sewer is just going into the storm sewer.
Okay. Yep.
And if that is the case, what are we doing to help them deal with this? First of all, you might have bought a house 20 years ago on a particular street, and all of a sudden someone knocks on your door and says, hey, you're tied in illegally to one of the other drains.
Yes.
And it becomes costly to correct that. Now, you talk about the SRF fund, State Revolving Fund.
Yep.
That would this be a loan, a grant, maybe a part of both? And at what percentage rate? Is it the 2% that the city would borrow money from the state, or is it a higher percentage rate, a lower percentage rate? I'd like to get some ideas, because I am sure we are going to find these situations throughout the city.
Yep.
And the other thing question I have for you is, on this diagram, you show the sanitary sewer
Yes.
running closer to the property, and it's been my understanding that that line runs, in most cases, down the center of the street.
It really depends, Counselor, on where it is. This is more illustrative, so folks can get an idea. If it was on the other side of the street, for example, this line would just be longer and could be potentially more of a problem. So this is meant to depict a general condition. It could be that in some areas it's on this side, it could be on this side, it could be in the center. This was more so that when someone who doesn't understand what these issues are, we can sit down with them at their house and try to explain it to them. So it's not meant to be the condition throughout the city.
Because my feeling is that, again, you may have bought a house 20 years ago.
Yes.
All of a sudden, you realize that this is happening, and it's going to cost you money.
Yes.
And I think that myself, it should be, if a person is unknowing that this situation, we should do all we can to help them to, in the monetary sense, to correct that problem. Now, and Donnie, I was downtown Ellerton Street today, and as you know, there was a problem a fellow was having with a sewerage on North Shore Road. They couldn't hook up on North Shore Road. They had to go through someone's backyard to get to the line on Elton Street. And that's the reason I asked that question about the sanitary sewer line, because where that was hooked up, if you're looking at the location it was hooked up, it's right beside the sidewalk where the storm drain runs down there, because as you know, we did all new storm drains down there a couple of years ago. And I just hope that that sewerage isn't going into a storm drain down there.
Yeah, well, that contributes to other factors that this consent order being into, which is illicit discharge that comes from that, goes into the storm drain, and we get high count readings on that. That particular case involves a service line, John. It doesn't involve a city's main sanitary sewer line. So basically what happened years ago is that sometimes you have multiple homes on one service line. You'll have one house behind another, or they ran it across a piece of property into a service line, then out to the street. They're owned in common ownership by the two people that own the property. The issue relative to what you're speaking to today, that the problem has been corrected as far as the sanitary service line goes. There is a problem, however, that the person who was responsible for fixing that sanitary sewer line did not complete the overall project as far as putting the person's yard that they disrupted.
Fencing, et cetera.
Yes, and that's something that we're dealing with. We'll get on the person who did it, and if need be, we'll go after their bond to make them finish up the project.
The reason I bring that up, I had a call just prior to the meeting, and it's at 11 Ellerton Street. So I just want to make sure that
He's 100% right.
we get that corrected for the resident down there.
He's a
And
nice fellow.
yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you, Councilor Powers. Councilor Guanasso.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The obvious is we're all here trying to do what's right for our community. But to be a realist, there must be hundreds of these situations within our community. And we're going to, as elected officials, experience quite a bit of the pain when all those calls come to us for help. And we're going to have to reach out to help these individuals because some of them are really, really in need of some sort of help. There are many, many areas that I represent. It's a floodplain area to begin with.
Yes.
In one particular home on Boston Street, they must get water by the gallons because when they release their water out it floods the whole area. Mm-hmm. Now, given the fact that we have a winter storm, that turns into a sheet of ice. Yep. We have this is a situation that we have to attend to because she's doing it the right way. She's doing it the legal way. Mm-hmm. She's doing it as she's been told to discharge that water into the street. And
yes.
She's doing that, but the whole area becomes inundated with water.
Yes.
The neighbor next door, I know, is unhappy. But like I said to her, you're doing what you're supposed to do, but the unfortunate part is very, very dangerous. And we've got to come up with some sort of mechanism to help these individuals with that because maybe we can, during the summer months or spring months, come in with some sort of apparatus that can make dig a hole and bury the pipe and let it go elsewhere around these pipes here, but not into the system. But it's really going to be unbelievable once this takes a place. You know, we can all sit up here and suggest that we have halos over our head, and when the boom is lowered on us, it's going to come down pretty hard. And I'm concerned about that. And, you know, they made mention, I looked also in Section I, and I was having my lunch when I was reading it today, and I almost took a mild heart attack. A $5,000 fine. They lowered it from $10,000 a day. And that's a civil action. You know, I trust you, Bob, and I trust my dear friend Donnie Goodwin, because I know these individuals, and I know that you're going to do what's right for our community.
Thank you.
But what happens when we're not part of this process? And there's somebody else that we don't know that doesn't have good judgment, doesn't have a heart, because some of these people are going to be financially strapped, and it's going to wipe them out. Mm-hmm. It's going to cost more money to have their water from their home discharged than for anything they could possibly do. So I'm concerned about that large amount. And the wisdom of the state, which I don't think it has too much wisdom, it lowered it from 10 to 5. That spells out something if they think it's too high. I think I'd like to address that also to make it, reasonable. We are paying this consent decree, and the government who's placed this upon us haven't offered us a dime of revenue to help us relieve this problem. And that bothers me. You know, they stuck us with cleaning the ocean. They put that mandate on each and every ratepayer in our community. Now they're going to do this again. We're going to drown in our own water one way or another, and it just bothers me that this is going to be so expensive to take care of. So I'm not playing the pessimist, I'm being the realist. And the realist tells me that, wow, this is going to hit our community. It's going to hit it hard for this consent decree, to be honest. And I think we have to do that, but how do we do it? In a fashion that is reasonable. Because I don't want to see any of my friends or anybody in the community financially burdened with this endeavor that we have to do. So how we should, I know the SRF is going to come up with some monies, but that's just a thrown out figure. Now, we don't even have the figure yet, but how do we get a more realistic, I'd like to know what they're talking about in helping us with these homes that need to be helped, and how much is going to be allocated, because Arthur Guanasso knows Joe Smo, he's going to get $500 to get his pumps taken care of. The poor person that knows nobody is going to pay $1,000. You know, I want it to be level for all of us, so we all get the fair treatment.
There's a lot of information there, and I'm trying to think the best way to respond. I think you are correct that it is a concern. Splashing water across the street, safety issues are a concern. I mentioned earlier the city is looking at cost to increase the stormwater system, so there are the right pipes to go to connect to so that the icing condition doesn't occur. As we've been working, and we did a lot of inflow projects this summer, we had several major connections that were inappropriate that we removed this summer, and we were working with homeowners and property owners to make that happen. So I can just offer you the demonstration of what we've been trying to do over the last couple of years since we've gotten aggressive in this consent decree and our compliance as something that we would do moving forward. Many of your neighbors in the surrounding communities are facing very similar issues, and they're concerned about the rate impacts and the tax impacts and those things as well. And it's a balance and that needs to be looked at. I will say that in many cases, some of the problems that you're having are also public health issues, where because the water that's in there that shouldn't be in there is in the sewer system, then the actual sewage that's supposed to be there can't get in, and that creates an equally challenging problem, and some may say even worse problem because of the public health impacts. People could get sick from that water being out on the street and being in contact. So we're trying to balance all those things to help homeowners and do it in a way that isn't unfair, is in fact fair to everybody. And there's a fair amount of work that needs to be done.
Bob, we've been living with this for years, and
Yes.
so I don't know if anybody's died recently from these, and they're all health factors, and everything's a health factor. But you also have the safety factor that we have to live with. I'm concerned about the realistic factor of how is someone, are we going to give them reasonable time? And I know you and Don and anyone who's in management now is going to do this. The only other thing that bothers me here is someone remove some of our authority when we say it's the Director of Public Works or the Public Works Department or Mass Water Resource. Now we're taking it to a different agency who could care less about our locals. That bothers me. And Mass Water Resource has equal authority over this position. And I'm concerned about that.
Okay.
So I think our local people will be more sensitive to the needs of our community, but I'm not so sure that someone sitting in Boston that's already croaking us with these high fees is going to be reasonable again, because Mass Water Resource isn't very reasonable to us. And so every time we deal with them, we're paying dearly for this, and I'm concerned about that. I don't like them being part of, why should Mass Water I think we should keep it within our own city. Is there a state statute that says we have to?
Well, the idea of it, Arthur, is that we don't control our own sanitary system. We rely on the MWA for treatment and transportation of the fluids to where they need to be properly processed. So, and essentially, we're partners with the MWA in our collection system. And where they get involved is mostly probably with the larger commercial industries that need special permitting, or if we come into the town, there's special permitting requiring. My experience with the MWRA has been a good one. I think that, you know, obviously we don't like to pay the rates and things of that nature, but any time that we've called upon them for any type of assistance, equipment, or anything like that, we've always come up with a very favorable response from the MWRA. So, and essentially, I hate to say it, but we are linked to the MWRA because our sewer cannot flow without their help. All our storage flows into the MWRA system. So they have some operational flexibility that coincides with what goes on in Revere. And like I said, so they have to play a major part in not only what goes on, but with the consent order as well. Bob is working on a lot of issues with the MWRA themselves that what they will have to do will help the city of Revere by changing the way they do business. This is something he's been working on for 4 years now. And it's going to be more time before we get the final studies and everything out to see exactly, what we have to do. But, it all comes down to, like Bob can tell you, this year, we've done many, many, many things for people. We've extended sewer lines and drain lines and all kinds of avenues.
So
to
that's
try to
the approach that I
accommodate.
like to see, because that's what we have an enterprise fund for, and that's what we,
Well, that's-
in somewhat in relationship
But
to the
we
Mass
also
Water.
have to be aware that, with the sump pump issues, and so it's going to be a house-by-house, case-by-case issue. There may be something where we can just extend a piece of flexible line
That's
out
what
to
I'm
the
talking,
curb
that's
line
exactly what I
that,
mean, to help out a little
we
bit,
can
that's
get
all.
into the drain.
That's
but
what I mean.
There are many, many areas out there, and a lot of it is in your area. The infrastructure is just not complete enough to do the things that we need to do. So there are going to be areas, and once we get to the stormwater management aspect of this whole issue, it's probably going to get more expensive than what we're dealing with at this point. That's what I see coming down the road. So the enterprise fund, the taxpayer and the ratepayer can only absorb so much of this cost. So there's going to have to be some type of partnership between ourselves, the residents, and what we want to do is make it as least painful.
That's why I want the
as we
control to
can.
remain here, because you're sensitive to the needs of our community. Someone from Boston isn't sensitive to our
The
needs. and-
MWR will never tell us what to do.
Well, I would hope
with
not.
our own
According to this, it gives you
infrastructure, unless they
equal
detect that there's
jurisdiction.
somebody dumping some illicit type of chemical or poison or
Right.
things of that nature. If anything, when we call them up, they come in to help us out there. They
That's
never
good.
come in, they don't come in with a dictatorial type of attitude and say, you're going to do it this way, or we're going to shut down your flow, or we're going to do
Thank
something
you.
like that. The MWA has been very, very helpful.
Thank you for your
To me
response.
over the last.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Guanasso. Seeing that Councilor Reardon made a good point in asking for a full description of the ordinances, I hope we can maybe get that within the next week, and we can have another committee meeting next week. So we'll keep it in committee, and if you could get that to us.
The end of December, end of January, so we do have a little more time with the compliance report to.
I know it's kind of putting you guys under the gun a little bit, but we really like to have this done by mid-January, so when we make our next submittal to the EPA and the DEP, that this is part of
Yeah.
our submittal.
That would be the plan, that we could hopefully maybe get it out of committee next week. But if we can get that information, that'd be great.
Sure, Frank, I've been working with Frank Stringy. He's out for another day or two. As soon as he gets back into the office, I'll work with him to make sure it's in your package, hopefully by this week.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Have a good night.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn? Thank you.